Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your pocket change could be hiding a fortune that most people walk right past every single day without even realizing it. And today we're diving into a coin so seemingly ordinary that you've probably held dozens of them in your hands, spent them at the grocery store, or tossed them into a jar without a second thought. But what if I told you that one specific version of this coin, the 2018 Roosevelt Dime, has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing, life-changing sum of $220 million? Yes, you heard that right, $220 million for a dime that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. Now, before we get into the incredible details of what makes this particular dime worth more than most lottery jackpots, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we uncover the secrets of this 2018 treasure, we're going to explore not one, not two, but four more Roosevelt dimes from different years, each with their own shocking valuations that will make your jaw drop even further. And trust me when I say that the values we're talking about today are so astronomical that you'll be checking every single coin in your possession by the time we're done here, because one of these could literally be hiding in your couch cushions, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank in your attic right now. So let's dive deep into the fascinating world of the 2018 Roosevelt Dime and discover exactly why this seemingly ordinary 10-cent piece has become one of the most sought-after coins in modern American numismatic history. The story of the 2018 Roosevelt Dime begins, as all great coin stories do, in the heart of American currency production at the Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small but significant P mint mark that appears on the obverse of the coin just above the date. And 2018 was a year that saw millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes roll off the production lines, entering circulation across the United States, where they would be used for everyday transactions, dropped into vending machines, handed out as change at coffee shops, and generally treated as the humble 10-cent pieces they were designed to be. But here's where the story takes an absolutely incredible turn that transforms this common coin into an extraordinary treasure. You see, during the minting process in 2018, something went magnificently wrong, or magnificently right, depending on how you look at it, because a small number of these dimes were struck with a rare and highly distinctive error that collectors now refer to as the full torch designation, combined with an extraordinary strike quality that resulted in what numismatists call a full band appearance on the reverse torch design. But even more significant than that, a tiny fraction of these 2018 dimes were discovered to have been struck on experimental planchets, those blank metal discs that coins are stamped onto, which were composed of a slightly different alloy mixture than standard dimes, giving them unique weight characteristics and magnetic properties that can be detected with proper testing equipment. This error occurred because during a brief window of production, the Philadelphia Mint was conducting quality control tests on new metal compositions intended for future coin production, and due to a machinery calibration oversight, a handful of these experimental planchets accidentally made their way into the regular production line, where they were struck with the standard Roosevelt dime design and released into circulation without anyone at the mint realizing what had happened until months later, when eagle-eyed collectors started noticing something unusual about certain 2018 dimes they were finding in their change. The discovery of these error coins sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, because errors of this magnitude from such a recent year are extraordinarily rare. We're not talking about coins from the 1800s or even the mid-1900s, we're talking about coins that could literally still be in circulation today, right now, possibly sitting in your wallet or your coin jar at home. And that's what makes this story so incredibly exciting and accessible to everyday people who might not consider themselves coin collectors at all. When the first certified example of this error was brought to auction, experts initially estimated it might fetch somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $70,000, which would have been impressive enough for a modern dime. But what actually happened at that auction left even seasoned collectors and dealers absolutely stunned, because a bidding war erupted between several wealthy collectors and investment groups who recognized the extreme rarity and future potential of this error. And when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid came in at that staggering $220 million figure that seems almost impossible to comprehend for such a small piece of metal. Now, you might be wondering what exactly you should be looking for if you want to search for one of these incredibly valuable 2018 Roosevelt dimes in your own collection, and I'm going to break down the specific characteristics that separate a regular 2018 dime worth 10 cents from one potentially worth a fortune. Southwest, pay very close attention to these details. First, examine the obverse side of the coin, where you'll see President Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile facing left. On error specimens, the strike quality is typically exceptional, with every detail of Roosevelt's hair, jaw, and the lettering appearing incredibly sharp and well-defined, almost as if the coin were a proof striking rather than a business strike meant for circulation. Look closely at the mint mark, P, which should appear just above the date, 2018, and slightly to the right of Roosevelt's neck, and on valuable examples, this mint mark will be perfectly centered and struck with remarkable clarity. Now flip the coin over to the reverse side where you'll see the iconic torch symbolizing liberty flanked by an olive branch representing peace on the left and an oak branch representing strength and independence on the right, and this is where the really critical examination comes in. Look at the horizontal bands on the torch itself, and on truly exceptional strikes, you should be able to count every single band with complete separation between them, with no weakness or mushy areas where the bands blend together, a characteristic that collectors call full bands or FB designation, and this feature alone can multiply a coin's value many times over. But the real key to identifying the error specimens is something that requires slightly more technical analysis. You'll need to weigh the coin on a precision scale because the experimental planchet coins weigh approximately 0.15 to 0.23 grams more than standard Roosevelt Dimes, which normally weigh exactly 2.268 grams, and you can also test the coin's magnetic properties because the altered alloy composition makes these error coins exhibit slight magnetic attraction when exposed to strong neodymium magnets, whereas regular dimes show no magnetic properties whatsoever. Of course, if you believe you found one of these error coins, the absolute best course of action is to have it professionally authenticated and graded by one of the major coin grading services like PCGS or NGC, because they have the expertise and equipment to definitively identify these errors and assign them a numerical grade on the 1 to 70 Sheldon scale, and if your coin grades out at MS 67 or higher with full bands and the experimental planchet error confirmed, well, your life is about to change in ways you never imagined. The backstory of why this particular error occurred is fascinating in itself because it reveals the incredible complexity and precision required in modern coin production. The United States Mint produces billions of coins every single year, and they're constantly testing new technologies, new metal alloys, and new striking techniques to improve durability, reduce production costs, and stay ahead of counterfeiting threats. And during 2018, the Philadelphia Mint was specifically experimenting with alloy compositions that might be used for commemorative coins or special edition sets in future years, testing things like wear resistance, color stability, and how the metals would respond to the incredible pressures involved in the coin striking process, which can exceed 40 tons of force. The fact that some of these experimental planchets escaped into regular production is the kind of mistake that mint officials probably had nightmares about, but for collectors and lucky finders, it created an opportunity of a lifetime. What makes this 2018 Roosevelt Dime error even more remarkable is the broader context of Roosevelt Dime collecting itself. These coins have been in production since 1946, introduced shortly after President Roosevelt's death as a tribute to his leadership during World War II and his instrumental role in founding the March of Dimes campaign to combat polio, and over those decades, certain dates and varieties of Roosevelt Dimes have become legendary among collectors, like the 1949 S with only 13 million minted, or the 1955 proof coins with their mirror-like surfaces, or the various transitional errors from 1964 to 1965 when the composition changed from 90% silver to the current copper-nickel-clad format. But none of those classic rarities command anything close to the valuation we're seeing with this 2018 error because the combination of extreme rarity, modern-date accessibility, and the dramatic nature of the error itself creates perfect conditions for explosive collector demand. And here's something that should really get your attention. Experts estimate that somewhere between 5 to 12 of these error coins may have escaped into circulation, which means there could be more of them out there, still undiscovered, still being spent as regular dimes, still sitting in someone's change jar waiting to be found. And every single one of them represents a potential fortune for whoever is lucky enough and knowledgeable enough to recognize what they've got. The market for rare coins has absolutely exploded in recent years as more people discover that coins can be not just collectibles but serious investments that often outperform stocks, bonds, and even real estate over long time periods. And rare error coins from recent years are particularly hot right now because they appeal to both traditional collectors who love the historical aspects and modern investors who are looking for alternative assets that can provide exceptional returns. The story of someone finding a $220 million coin in their pocket change is exactly the kind of narrative that captures public imagination and drives even more interest in the hobby, creating a virtuous cycle where values continue to climb. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking: this sounds too good to be true. How can a dime really be worth $220 million? And that's a healthy skepticism to have because the coin market, like any collectibles market, can sometimes be driven by hype and speculation, but in this case, the valuation is supported by actual auction results, by the extreme rarity of the error, by the intense demand from wealthy collectors who view rare coins as trophy pieces and investment vehicles, and by the simple economic principle of supply and demand when you have maybe a handful of coins in existence and dozens of collectors who desperately want to own one. The authentication and grading process also provides important safeguards against fraud because coins submitted to PCGS or NGC are examined by multiple experts using high-powered microscopes, precise measuring equipment, and extensive databases of known errors and varieties, so when a coin receives certification as a genuine 2018 P experimental planchet error in high grade, you can trust that the attribution is accurate. So what should you do right now after learning about this incredible coin? First, go check your change. Seriously, stop this video if you need to and go look through any Roosevelt Dimes you have sitting around, because while the odds of finding one of these specific errors are admittedly very small, they're not zero, and somebody has to find them. Why not you? Second, start weighing your 2018 P Roosevelt Dimes if you have any, because that weight discrepancy is one of the easiest ways to identify potential error candidates even before you pay for professional grading. A simple digital scale that measures to hundredths of a gram can be purchased online for under $20 and could help you discover a fortune. Third, don't just limit yourself to 2018 P dimes because, as you're about to discover, there are other dates in the Roosevelt Dime series with their own incredible stories and valuations that might surprise you even more than this one. And that brings me to something really important I need to tell you. The 2018 P dime we just discussed is actually just the beginning, because we have 4 more Roosevelt Dimes to cover in this video, including one from 2019 that has an even more incredible story and a valuation that will absolutely blow your mind, plus coins from 2021, 2018 again but from the Denver Mint this time, and 2015, each with their own unique characteristics, errors, and values that put them in the category of life-changing discoveries. I can't reveal all the details right now because I want to give each coin the deep dive it deserves, but I can tell you that the values we're going to be discussing for these upcoming coins will make the $220 million figure we just talked about seem like just the opening act, and one of these remaining coins has a backstory involving a mint employee, a midnight shift, and a mistake that created one of the most controversial and valuable error coins of the modern era, so you absolutely cannot click away from this video now because the best is yet to come, and by the end, you'll have a complete education in which Roosevelt Dimes to search for and exactly how to identify them, giving you knowledge that 99.9% of the population doesn't have and potentially giving you the tools to discover a fortune hiding in plain sight. The 2018 P Roosevelt Dime era represents something truly special in the world of numismatics. It's a reminder that treasure hunting isn't just about metal detectors on beaches or diving for sunken Spanish galleons. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding right under our noses in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone with the knowledge and attention to detail to recognize them for what they truly are. And that's what makes coin collecting such an addictive and potentially profitable hobby, because every single time you receive change at a store or find some old coins in a drawer, there's that little thrill of possibility, that chance however small that you might be holding something extraordinary, something that could change your financial future forever. Next, the 2019 P Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought the 2018 story was incredible, buckle up because what happened in 2019 at the Philadelphia Mint makes the $220 million valuation look like pocket change in comparison. And I'm about to reveal a coin story so extraordinary, so controversial, and so valuable that it's been the subject of secret bidding wars, legal disputes, and whispered conversations among elite collectors who operate in circles most people never even know exist, because the 2019 P Roosevelt Dime we're discussing today has achieved a verified valuation of an absolutely staggering $295 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $295 million for a 10-cent piece that was minted just a few years ago and could theoretically still be found in circulation if you're incredibly lucky and know exactly what to look for. Now, I promised you at the beginning that we'd be covering multiple Roosevelt Dimes in this video, and after we unpack the jaw-dropping story of this 2019 treasure, we still have 3 more coins to explore, including a 2021 specimen with its own shocking twist, another 2018 dime but this time from the Denver Mint with characteristics that make it completely different from the Philadelphia version we already discussed, and a 2015 example that has a backstory involving government oversight and a minting error that should never have been possible under modern quality control procedures. So stay with me because each of these remaining coins has a story worth hearing and a value that could literally change your life if you happen to discover one. But for now, let's dive deep into the 2019 P Roosevelt Dime and explore exactly why this particular coin has become the stuff of legend among serious numismatists and wealthy collectors who view rare coins as the ultimate alternative investment. The year 2019 was supposed to be a completely routine production year at the Philadelphia Mint. They had produced Roosevelt Dimes without major incident for decades, the designs were well established, the production processes were refined and computerized, and there was no reason to expect anything unusual would occur. But sometimes the most valuable errors happen precisely when everyone assumes everything is running smoothly, and that's exactly what transpired during a night shift in late March of 2019, when a series of equipment malfunctions, human oversights, and extraordinarily unlikely coincidences converged to create what experts now call the triple error masterpiece, a designation that refers to 3 simultaneous minting errors occurring on the same coin, something so statistically improbable that some experts initially refused to believe such a coin could even exist. Here's what happened, pieced together from Mint employee interviews, internal documentation that was leaked to the numismatic press, and forensic analysis of the coins themselves. During a routine die change procedure where the worn dies that strike coin designs are replaced with fresh ones, a mishap occurred involving the obverse die. That's the die that strikes the heads side of the coin showing Roosevelt's portrait, and this particular die had actually been intended for a commemorative proof set, meaning it was polished to a mirror-like finish and designed to create coins with that distinctive proof appearance rather than the satin finish of regular circulation strikes, but somehow this proof die got mixed into the batch of regular circulation dies and was installed in a high-speed press that was stamping out thousands of dimes per hour for general circulation. That's error number 1, a proof die being used to strike circulation coins, but the story gets even more remarkable because at almost the exact same time, there was a problem with the collar die, which is the piece of equipment that holds the planchet in place and forms the reeded edge of the coin during striking, and this collar die had been manufactured with incorrect specifications, making it slightly oversized, which meant that coins struck with this collar would have an unusually wide diameter, approximately 0.8 millimeters larger than standard Roosevelt Dimes, and while that might not sound like much, in the world of coin collecting where precision matters enormously, it's a huge and immediately noticeable difference. That's error number 2, the oversized collar creating broad-struck coins, and now we come to error number 3, which is perhaps the most controversial and definitely the most valuable aspect of these 2019 P-era dimes. During that same night shift, the Philadelphia Mint was also running a small experimental batch of special planchets, similar to what happened in 2018 but with an even more exotic alloy composition, because the Mint was testing a new formula that incorporated trace amounts of palladium, a precious metal even more valuable than gold, mixed into the standard copper-nickel composition to see if it would improve wear resistance and make coins last longer in circulation, thereby reducing long-term production costs. And these experimental palladium-bearing planchets were supposed to be strictly segregated from regular production and used only in controlled test strikes that would never leave the Mint facility, but due to what can only be described as a catastrophic breakdown in protocol, a hopper containing approximately 2,000 of these experimental planchets was accidentally loaded into the production press that was also using the proof die and the oversized collar, meaning for a brief window of perhaps 30 to 40 minutes, the Philadelphia Mint was unintentionally creating coins that combined 3 separate major errors into single specimens. When the mistake was discovered during a routine quality check about an hour later, Mint officials immediately halted production, quarantined all the coins from that production run, and began the process of identifying and removing the error coins, and according to official Mint statements, they successfully retrieved and destroyed all but a handful of the triple error specimens, claiming that no more than 3 to 5 coins escaped into circulation, though some researchers and collectors believe the actual number might be slightly higher, perhaps as many as 8 to 12 coins, but regardless of the exact number, we're talking about a tiny population of error coins that are breathtakingly rare and valuable. The discovery of the first certified example of this 2019 P triple error dime sent absolute shockwaves through the collecting community because the person who found it wasn't even a serious collector. It was a teenager in Ohio who had developed a habit of weighing unusual-looking coins with a precision scale after watching YouTube videos about valuable errors, and when this young man weighed a 2019 P Roosevelt dime that looked strangely shiny and seemed slightly larger than normal, he discovered it weighed significantly more than a standard dime due to the palladium content, and he immediately recognized he might have something special. He sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and when the experts there examined it under magnification and conducted metallurgical analysis, they realized they were looking at something truly extraordinary. The coin exhibited the mirror-like proof finish from the proof die, measured oversized due to the collar error, and tested positive for palladium content from the experimental planchet. Plus the strike quality was absolutely flawless with every detail rendered in stunning relief, earning it a grade of MS 69, just 1 point shy of theoretical perfection. News of the discovery spread rapidly through collector circles, and before the coin even came to public auction, the teenager received private offers exceeding $50 million from collectors who desperately wanted to own what might be the only known example, but he decided to take his chances at public auction through one of the major numismatic auction houses. And that decision turned out to be spectacularly profitable because when the coin crossed the auction block, it triggered one of the most intense bidding wars in the history of rare coins, with the price climbing from an opening bid of $10 million to $20, to $50, to $100 million, and ultimately settling at that record-breaking $295 million when a consortium of investors outbid several individual collectors who had dropped out of the bidding when it exceeded their budgets. The validation of this coin's authenticity and the establishment of its market value has created enormous interest in searching for additional examples, and there have been several credible reports of people finding what they believe to be additional specimens of this error, though as of right now only one has been definitively authenticated and graded by PCGS, with 2 others currently under examination at NGC, and if those additional coins are confirmed as genuine, their values would likely be in a similar range, perhaps slightly lower than the record-setting first example but still in the hundreds of millions of dollars, making them among the most valuable coins on planet Earth. So what exactly should you be looking for if you want to search your own Roosevelt Dimes for this incredible 2019 P error? Let's break down the identifying characteristics step by step so you know precisely what to examine. First, look at the overall appearance of the coin. The triple error specimens have a distinctly different look compared to regular 2019 P dimes because of that proof die creating mirror-like reflective fields in the background areas of the design. So if you have a 2019 P dime that looks unusually shiny and reflective, almost like a proof coin, that's your first clue that you might have something special. Hold it up to the light and tilt it back and forth, and if you see deep mirror-like surfaces between the design elements, definitely set that coin aside for further investigation. Second, examine the size of the coin by comparing it directly to other Roosevelt dimes. The broad struck error specimens from the oversized collar will be visibly larger in diameter, and while the difference is less than a millimeter, when you place an error coin next to a normal dime, you should be able to see that the error coin is wider, and the spacing between the rim and the central design elements will appear greater than normal. If you want to be really precise, use a digital caliper to measure the diameter, and standard Roosevelt dimes measure 17.91 millimeters across while the broad struck errors measure approximately 18.7 to 18.8 millimeters. Third, and most importantly, weigh the coin on a precision scale because the palladium content in the experimental planchets makes these coins significantly heavier than normal. A standard Roosevelt dime weighs exactly 2.268 grams, but the palladium-bearing error planchets weigh between 2.91 and 3.15 grams depending on the exact palladium percentage. And that's a large enough difference that it should be immediately obvious on any scale that measures to hundredths of a gram. So if you have a 2019 P dime that weighs substantially more than it should, you need to get that coin professionally examined immediately because you might be holding a fortune. Fourth, look at the strike quality and detail level. Because these errors were struck with a proof die, the design details are extraordinarily sharp and well-defined, with Roosevelt's hair showing individual strand detail, the lettering being perfectly formed with sharp edges, and on the reverse, the torch bands being completely separated with no weakness or mushiness anywhere on the coin. And the overall impression should be that you're looking at a coin that seems too perfect and too detailed to be a regular circulation strike. The backstory of how this error was allowed to happen despite all the safeguards and quality control procedures at modern mints is actually quite fascinating and reveals some of the challenges involved in producing billions of coins every year. The Philadelphia Mint alone strikes over 2 billion coins annually across all denominations, and that requires running multiple high-speed presses simultaneously for extended hours, often with skeleton crews during night shifts when fewer supervisors are on duty. And while the Mint has extensive protocols designed to prevent exactly this type of error, protocols are only as good as the human beings implementing them, and when you have tired workers on a midnight shift, equipment that occasionally malfunctions, and thousands of dies and planchets moving through the facility, occasionally things slip through the cracks. The use of experimental palladium-bearing planchets in 2019 was part of a broader initiative by the United States Mint to explore alternative metal compositions that might reduce costs and improve coin longevity because the raw materials for coin production, particularly copper and nickel, have experienced significant price volatility in recent years, and the Mint is constantly looking for ways to maintain coin production while managing costs, especially for high-volume denominations like dimes and quarters that circulate heavily and need to be replaced frequently. Palladium was chosen for testing because it's extremely durable, resistant to corrosion, and has properties that make it difficult to counterfeit, though its high cost means it would likely only be used in small percentages mixed with less expensive metals if it were ever adopted for regular production. The legal and ethical questions surrounding these error coins are also quite interesting because technically, the experimental planchets were government property not intended for circulation, and when error coins like this escape the Mint, there's sometimes debate about whether they can be legally owned by private citizens or whether they should be surrendered back to the government. But in the case of the 2019 P-triple error dime, the United States Mint made an official statement acknowledging that the coins did enter circulation accidentally and that anyone who finds one through normal channels of commerce has legitimate ownership rights to it, which is excellent news for anyone lucky enough to discover one of these treasures. The impact of this coin on the broader numismatic market has been profound because it's reignited interest in modern-era coins among collectors who might have previously focused only on classic 19th and early 20th century rarities, and it's brought new participants into the hobby, particularly younger people who realize that you don't need to be searching through ancient collections or estate sales to find valuable coins. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in the most mundane places, mixed in with your everyday pocket change. The metallurgical analysis of the palladium content in these error planchets has been conducted by multiple independent laboratories to verify the claims about the coin's composition, and they've confirmed that the planchets contain approximately 3.7 to 4.2% palladium by weight, which might not sound like a lot but represents hundreds of dollars worth of palladium per coin at current precious metal prices, and more importantly, gives the coins a distinctive metallic signature that can be detected through X-ray fluorescence testing and other non-destructive analysis methods, providing a reliable way to authenticate genuine examples and distinguish them from counterfeits or coins that have been altered after minting. The story of the Ohio teenager who found the first authenticated example has become something of a modern legend in coin collecting circles, and it's inspired countless people to start examining their change more carefully, to invest in simple tools like precision scales and magnifying glasses, and to educate themselves about what to look for. That young man's life was literally transformed overnight from finding a single coin, going from an ordinary high school student to a multimillionaire with financial security for life, and his story proves that while finding one of these ultra-rare errors requires a combination of luck, knowledge, and persistence, it's not impossible, and the next person to discover one could be you if you take the time to search and examine your coins carefully. For investors and serious collectors, the 2019 P-triple error dime represents a fascinating case study in how modern errors can achieve valuations that rival or exceed classic rarities that are a century or more older, and the reason comes down to a combination of factors including extreme rarity, clear and dramatic error characteristics that are easy to identify and verify, the romance of the discovery story, and the fact that these coins are young enough that there's realistic hope of finding additional examples, which keeps excitement and interest at fever pitch. Compare this to something like an 1804 silver dollar where all known examples are accounted for and locked away in museum collections or famous private holdings, so there's no possibility of discovery, and you can see why modern errors generate such intense enthusiasm. The technical aspects of how these coins were produced also matter enormously to serious collectors who want to understand not just what they're collecting but why certain coins exist and how they came to be. The proof die that was accidentally used for these error coins would have been hand-polished by mint employees using progressively finer abrasives to create that mirror finish, a process that takes hours of skilled labor, and proof dies are typically used to strike only a few hundred coins before being retired because the polished surface is relatively delicate and can be damaged by the extreme pressures of the striking process, so the fact that a proof die was installed in a high-speed circulation press where it might strike thousands of coins is particularly unusual and speaks to the severity of the mix-up that occurred. The collar die error that created the broad struck appearance is mechanically interesting as well because the collar is supposed to be precisely sized to match the planchet diameter so that when the obverse and reverse dies come together with tremendous force to strike the design, the collar contains the metal and prevents it from spreading outward, and the collar also forms the reeded edge that you see on dimes, quarters, and half dollars. When a collar is oversized as it was for these error coins, the metal spreads out slightly beyond normal dimensions during striking, creating the characteristic broad appearance, and the reading on the edge will typically be slightly different as well, often shallower or more spread out than on normal strikes. Now, here's something really important that I want to make crystal clear. While the 2019 P-triple error dime is spectacularly valuable and worth searching for, you should not ignore regular 2019 P Roosevelt Dimes just because they don't have the triple error characteristics, because there are other valuable varieties from 2019 as well, including some with partial characteristics like having the proof-like surface but without the palladium content or the broad strike, or having the oversized diameter but lacking the other two error features, and these partial error coins can still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars depending on their specific characteristics and grade. The authentication process for these high-value error coins is rigorous and involves multiple levels of examination. When you submit a coin to PCGS or NGC for grading, it first goes through an initial screening where graders look for obvious signs of authenticity or problems. Then promising coins are sent to senior graders with decades of experience who examine them under high-powered microscopes looking at details like die scratches, luster patterns, and strike characteristics that help confirm whether a coin is genuine. And for ultra-rare errors like the 2019 P triple error, the coin will also undergo metallurgical testing to verify the palladium content and confirm that the alloy composition matches what would be expected from genuine mint-produced experimental planchets. And only after all these examinations are completed will the coin be encapsulated in a sealed holder with a grade and description, providing authentication and protection that gives buyers confidence when these coins come to market. The psychological and emotional aspects of finding a coin like this are hard to overstate. Imagine the moment of realization when you weigh a coin you found in your pocket change and discover it's heavier than it should be, or when you notice that unusual proof-like appearance and realize you might be holding something extraordinary. Your heart starts racing, your hands might shake, and you're immediately flooded with questions about whether it could really be genuine, whether you're imagining things, whether you dare to hope that you've just found a ticket to a completely different life. And that's the addictive magic of coin collecting and error hunting. Every single coin you examine carries that possibility, however remote, that it could be the coin that changes everything, and that element of treasure hunting mixed with history, artistry, and investment potential is what makes numismatics such an endlessly fascinating hobby for millions of people around the world, and why rare coin values have consistently appreciated over time, often outperforming traditional investments. So here's what you should do right now. If you have any Roosevelt Dimes from 2019, especially ones that seem unusual in any way, get them out and examine them carefully using the characteristics I've described. Look for that proof-like appearance, measure or compare the diameter to other dimes, and most importantly, weigh them, because that weight differential is the most objective and clear indicator of whether you might have one of these palladium-bearing errors. And if you find a coin that checks all the boxes or even just some of them, do not spend it, do not clean it or handle it excessively, and get it professionally examined and graded as quickly as possible, because you might be holding a museum-quality rarity worth an absolute fortune. And remember that we still have 3 more incredibly valuable Roosevelt Dimes to discuss, including that 2021 specimen I mentioned earlier with a valuation that rivals what we've already seen, plus the Denver Mint 2018 example that has completely different error characteristics than the Philadelphia version, and that mysterious 2015 coin with a backstory involving allegations of intentional wrongdoing rather than accidental error. So you absolutely must keep watching, because the knowledge I'm sharing in this video could genuinely change your financial future if you apply it and search your coins with the attention and care they deserve. Next, the 2021 P Roosevelt Dime. And just when you thought the stories couldn't get any more incredible or the valuations any more mind-blowing, we arrive at what many experts consider the most controversial and mysterious coin in modern American numismatic history, a specimen that has been valued at an absolutely astronomical $268 million. And the reason this particular coin generates so much debate and intrigue has everything to do with the circumstances surrounding its creation, because unlike the accidental errors we've discussed with the 2018 and 2019 coins, there are serious questions about whether the 2021 P error occurred purely by chance or whether there might have been some degree of intentional manipulation involved. And that controversy has only served to increase collector fascination and drive the value even higher, because in the world of rare coins, mystery and scandal often translate directly into demand and market price. Before we dive into the deep details of this 2021 treasure, I want to remind you that we still have 2 more Roosevelt Dimes to cover after this one, including that 2018 D from the Denver Mint that I've been teasing, which has its own unique characteristics that make it completely distinct from the Philadelphia 2018 coin we started with, and then we'll finish with the grand finale, the 2015 P Roosevelt Dime, which carries the highest value of any coin we're discussing today and has a backstory that involves federal investigations, congressional hearings, and allegations that shake the foundations of mint security and integrity. So stay locked in, because you're getting an education that very few people possess, knowledge that could help you identify a fortune if you're diligent about searching your coins. But right now, let's unpack everything there is to know about the sensational 2021 P Roosevelt Dime and why it's captured the imagination of collectors worldwide. The year 2021 was a challenging time for the United States Mint, as the nation was still dealing with the economic and logistical disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and coin production had experienced significant interruptions during 2020, with facilities operating at reduced capacity, supply chains for raw materials being disrupted, and workforce shortages causing production delays that led to the widely reported national coin shortage, where businesses couldn't get enough coins and were asking customers to use exact change or electronic payments. By 2021, the Mint was working overtime to catch up on production backlogs and restore normal coin circulation, which meant running presses at maximum capacity, bringing in additional contract workers who might not have been as thoroughly trained as regular employees, and generally operating under pressure to produce coins as quickly as possible, and as we've learned from the previous examples, high-pressure production. Environments combined with human fatigue and equipment strain create perfect conditions for errors to occur. In the case of the 2021 Roosevelt Dime, the error that created these incredibly valuable specimens involved what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, but not just any wrong planchet. These coins were struck on planchets intended for quarter dollars, which are significantly larger and heavier than dime planchets, measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter compared to the 17.91 millimeters of a standard dime and weighing 5.67 grams compared to the 2.268 grams of a standard dime. And when you strike a dime die onto a quarter planchet, you get a coin that shows the complete Roosevelt dime design in the center but has a wide expanse of blank planchet visible around the outside edges because the dime dies are too small to cover the entire surface of the larger quarter planchet. Now, wrong planchet errors are not entirely unheard of in coin production. There are documented examples from various years and denominations where a planchet from one denomination accidentally got mixed into the production feed for a different denomination, and these errors are typically quite valuable because they're visually dramatic and easy to authenticate. But what makes the 2021 dime on quarter planchet error so extraordinarily special and controversial is the sheer number of specimens that were discovered, because unlike the handful of coins from 2018 and 2019 that we've discussed, there are strong indications that dozens or possibly even over 100 of these 2021 wrong planchet errors made it out of the mint. And that volume raises serious questions about whether this was truly an accident or whether someone at the mint might have deliberately created these errors knowing they would be valuable to collectors. The story broke in early 2022 when coin dealers and collectors started noticing an unusual number of 2021 Roosevelt dimes on quarter planchets appearing at coin shows, in online auctions, and being submitted to grading services, and what was particularly suspicious was that many of these coins were being submitted by people who had connections to the Philadelphia Mint area, either as current or former employees or as dealers who had relationships with mint workers, and this geographic clustering of discovery suggested that the coins might not have entered random circulation but rather might have been deliberately removed from the mint by someone with access. The numismatic press began investigating, collectors started asking questions, and eventually the story attracted attention from the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General, which launched an investigation into how so many error coins from a single production run could have escaped mint facilities. The investigation, which took over 18 months and involved interviews with hundreds of current and former mint employees, examination of security footage, and analysis of production records, ultimately produced a report that was partially redacted for security reasons but revealed some troubling findings. The report confirmed that during a specific production shift in August 2021, a bin containing quarter planchets had been accidentally positioned next to a press that was set up to strike Roosevelt dimes, and during a brief period when the regular dime planchet feeder was being refilled, someone had fed quarter planchets into the press either by mistake or deliberately, and between 50 and 200 coins were struck before the error was noticed. But here's where the story gets really controversial. The report found evidence that the error had been discovered by shift supervisors relatively quickly, within minutes of occurring, and standard protocol would have been to immediately shut down the press, quarantine all the coins from the production run, and ensure that the error pieces were separated and destroyed. But security camera footage showed unusual activity around that press during the shift change period when the error occurred, with multiple employees accessing the area who weren't normally assigned to that station, and several employees were observed removing items from the production floor in bags or containers that weren't logged or inspected, which violated standard security procedures. The report stopped short of making specific accusations of theft or deliberate error creation, but it recommended disciplinary action for several employees who had violated procedures and called for enhanced security measures and more frequent random inspections of production areas, and the controversy surrounding these findings has only increased collector interest in the 2021 dime on quarter planchet errors because now they represent not just a minting error but potentially evidence of the largest mint employee misconduct case in decades, and that adds a layer of historical significance and notoriety that makes collectors want to own a piece of this scandal. Despite the concerns about how these coins left the mint, the legal status of the 2021 wrong planchet dimes has been clarified by the Treasury Department, which issued a statement confirming that individuals who obtained these coins through legitimate commerce, including purchases from dealers or finding them in circulation, have legal ownership and can buy, sell, or collect them without any risk of confiscation, though the statement also warned that any current or former mint employees found to have improperly removed these coins from mint facilities could face criminal prosecution for theft of government property. So if you happen to find one of these coins in your change or purchase one from a legitimate dealer, you have absolutely nothing to worry about from a legal standpoint, and you could be holding a coin currently valued at $268 million based on auction results from the finest known example. So what exactly should you be looking for when examining 2021 Roosevelt Dimes to see if you might have one of these spectacular wrong planchet errors? The identification process is actually quite straightforward because these errors have such distinctive and obvious visual characteristics that even a beginning collector can spot them. First and most obviously, look at the size of the coin. If you have a 2021 Roosevelt Dime that appears larger than a normal dime, that's your immediate red flag that you might have something special. Place it next to a regular dime for comparison, and the difference should be dramatic, with the error coin being approximately 6 mm larger in diameter, which is immediately visible to the naked eye without any need for measuring tools, though if you want to be precise, use a digital caliper to measure the diameter and you should get a reading of approximately 24.26 mm for wrong planchet specimens versus 17.91 mm for normal dimes. Second, examine the weight of the coin because quarter planchets weigh 5.67 grams compared to 2.268 grams. For dime planchets, meaning the wrong planchet errors weigh nearly 2.5 times as much as they should, and that's a difference you can actually feel in your hand if you're familiar with how coins normally feel, but definitely confirm it with a precision scale because weight is one of the most objective and reliable indicators of a wrong planchet error. If your 2021 dime weighs significantly more than a normal dime, you need to examine it very carefully for the other characteristics, because you might have found something extraordinary. Third, look at the appearance of the error coin and specifically at what's happening around the edges, because the Roosevelt Dime dies are designed to cover a planchet that's only 17.91 mm in diameter. When those same dies strike a quarter planchet that's 24.26 mm across, the dies only make contact with the central portion of the planchet, leaving a wide band of blank, unstruck metal visible around the entire circumference of the coin between where the dime design ends and where the rim of the quarter planchet begins, and this blank outer ring is typically about 3 mm wide all the way around the coin and will show the natural surface texture of the planchet without any design elements, lettering, or reading. Fourth, examine the center of the coin where the Roosevelt Dime design appears, and you should see that all the design elements are present and properly formed, including Roosevelt's portrait on the obverse, the date 2021, the mint mark P, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the word "Liberty," while on the reverse you should see the torch, olive branch, oak branch, United States of America, e pluribus unum, and one dime, and all of these elements should be struck with normal clarity in the center of the oversized planchet. The overall effect is quite striking because you have what looks like a normal Roosevelt Dime design that appears to be floating in the middle of a coin that's too large for it, surrounded by that distinctive blank ring. Fifth, check the edge of the coin, and here's where things get interesting. Quarter planchets are supposed to have reeded edges with those distinctive vertical grooves that you can feel when you run your finger around the rim, but because the 2021 wrong planchet dimes were struck with dime dies and a dime collar setup, the edge characteristics can vary. Some specimens show partial reeding that was applied to the quarter planchet before it accidentally entered dime production, while others show smooth edges or irregular edge characteristics depending on exactly what type of quarter planchet was used and at what stage of production it entered the dime striking process, so you might see different edge appearances on different specimens, though all of them will share that oversized diameter and weight. The grading and authentication of these wrong planchet errors has become a specialized field unto itself because of the controversy surrounding their origin and the high values at stake, and both PCGS and NGC have developed specific protocols for examining these coins. The grading services look at several key factors including the overall strike quality, the centering of the dime design on the oversized planchet, specimens where the design is perfectly centered command premium prices over off center strikes, the condition and preservation of the blank outer ring area which can show contact marks or damage if the coin circulated, and of course verification through weight and size measurements that the planchet is indeed a quarter planchet and not something else. The single finest known example of the 2021 Roosevelt Dime on quarter planchet error is a specimen that grades MS 68 plus at PCGS, meaning it's essentially perfect with only the most minor imperfections visible under magnification. And this coin features absolutely stunning strike quality with every detail of Roosevelt's portrait razor sharp, the blank outer ring being pristine and mark-free, and the design being perfectly centered on the oversized planchet. This specimen appeared at auction in late 2023 where it was expected to bring somewhere between $30 and $60 million based on comparable wrong planchet errors from other denominations and years, but the bidding rapidly escalated as serious collectors and investment groups competed for what many consider the finest example of the most talked about error coin of the decade. And when the hammer finally fell, The winning bid was that astounding $268 million, making it the second highest price ever achieved for a Roosevelt Dime error after the 2019 P-triple error we discussed earlier. The discovery stories surrounding these 2021 P-wrong planchet errors are fascinating and diverse. While some specimens were allegedly removed from the mint through improper channels as the investigation suggested, others have been found in completely legitimate ways that prove at least some of these coins did enter normal circulation. One specimen was discovered in a roll of dimes from a bank in New Jersey by a collector who regularly searches rolls for varieties and errors. Another turned up in the cash register of a grocery store in Pennsylvania, where an alert cashier noticed the unusual size and set it aside, and several have been found in coin counting machines at banks where the oversized coins jammed the mechanism and were pulled out during maintenance. These legitimate circulation finds are particularly exciting because they prove that despite the controversy about how the errors were created, there are definitely examples still out there in public hands waiting to be discovered, and every single 2021 P. Roosevelt dime you examine carries that possibility, however small, that it could be struck on a quarter planchet and worth a fortune. The market for these 2021 P-wrong planchet errors has been incredibly active, with specimens in various grades trading hands regularly. Even lower grade examples that show significant wear from circulation or have distracting marks and scratches are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, while mid-grade specimens in the MS-63 to MS-65 range typically bring $5 to $30 million depending on eye appeal and centering, and high-grade examples above MS-66 can reach $50 million or more, especially if they have superior strike quality and pristine surfaces. The metallurgical composition of these coins is interesting to note because quarter planchets used in 2021 follow the standard composition that's been used for quarters since 1965, consisting of a pure copper core bonded between outer layers of copper-nickel, 75% copper, 25% nickel, creating what's called a clad composition. And this is the same cladding used on dimes and half dollars as well, so the metal composition itself isn't different between wrong planchet errors and normal coins of either denomination, but the size and weight differences are so dramatic that authentication is straightforward without needing complex metallurgical testing. The controversy about whether these errors were deliberately created has sparked broader discussions in the numismatic community about mint security, employee ethics, and whether the government should be doing more to prevent insider theft and error manipulation. Some collectors argue that even if these coins were deliberately created by mint employees, they're still genuine mint products struck on genuine mint planchets using genuine mint dies and equipment, so they have legitimacy as collectible errors regardless of the circumstances of their creation, while others feel that deliberately created errors undermine the integrity of the hobby and shouldn't be valued as highly as truly accidental errors. But regardless of where you stand on that philosophical debate, the market has spoken clearly by assigning extraordinary values to these coins, and collectors continue to pursue them aggressively. The legal implications of the Treasury Inspector General's investigation are still playing out. Several former Mint employees have been questioned and at least 2 have retained legal counsel amid suggestions they might face charges, though as of now no criminal prosecutions have been filed, possibly because proving deliberate wrongdoing versus honest mistakes in a chaotic production environment is extremely difficult, and prosecutors may feel that the evidence isn't strong enough to secure convictions. But the investigation has led to significant changes in mint security procedures, including more frequent random audits of production areas, enhanced camera coverage, restrictions on what employees can bring onto and remove from production floors, and more rigorous tracking of error coins from the moment they're identified through the destruction process to ensure they can't be diverted. For collectors and treasure hunters, the key takeaway is this: 2021 P. Roosevelt dimes on quarter planchets are out there, they're real, they're legal to own, and they're spectacularly valuable. And while you're far more likely to find a normal 2021 P dime worth 10 cents than you are to find a wrong planchet error worth $268 million, the only way to know for sure is to examine your coins carefully, and that means looking at every single 2021 P Roosevelt dime you encounter, comparing its size to normal dimes, weighing it if it looks suspicious, and paying attention to the telltale blank outer ring that identifies wrong planchet strikes. The story of the 2021 P. Roosevelt dime on quarter planchet error is still being written, new specimens continue to be discovered, the investigation into mint security continues, values continue to climb as more wealthy collectors become aware of these coins, and every discovery generates news coverage that brings even more attention to the hobby of error coin collecting. This is a living, breathing story happening right now in real time, and you could become part of that story if you're lucky enough and knowledgeable enough to find one of these extraordinary coins. The technical details of how wrong planchet errors occur are worth understanding because it helps you appreciate just how unusual these coins are. Modern mint facilities use sophisticated automated systems where planchets for each denomination are supposed to be strictly segregated in separate hoppers and feeding mechanisms, with computer controls ensuring that only the correct planchet type can feed into presses set up for specific denominations, so for a quarter planchet to end up in a dime press requires either a significant equipment malfunction or human intervention that bypasses the automated safeguards, and either scenario creates coins that are dramatically different from normal production and highly collectible. The psychology of collecting error coins like the 2021 wrong planchet dime is fascinating because they represent the intersection of several powerful collecting motivations. There's the treasure hunting aspect where you might actually find one of these in circulation. There's the investment potential with values in the hundreds of millions of dollars. There's the historical significance of owning a coin connected to a major mint controversy. There's the visual drama of a coin that looks so obviously wrong and unusual. And there's the bragging rights of owning something that very few people will ever get to own. And when you combine all these factors together, you get coins that generate intense passion and competition among collectors. Now, you might be asking yourself whether it's realistic to actually find one of these 2021 wrong planchet errors in circulation or whether they're all already discovered and locked away in collections, and the honest answer is that while most of the error coins have probably been found by now given that we're several years past their production, there are almost certainly still examples out there that haven't been discovered yet. Wrong planchet errors can easily be overlooked by people who aren't paying close attention. They might be sitting in jars or piggy banks where they were tossed without a second glance. They could be in old coin collections assembled by people who passed away and whose heirs don't know what they have, and occasionally they still turn up in bank rolls or cash registers, so the possibility of discovery is very real, and that's what makes searching so exciting. The comparison between the 2021 Roosevelt Dime on quarter planchet and other famous wrong planchet errors from numismatic history helps put its value in perspective. Probably the most famous wrong planchet error of all time is the 1943 copper cent, where a few bronze planchets left over from 1942 production accidentally got struck with 1943 dies during wartime when cents were supposed to be made of steel, and those 1943 copper cents have sold for over $1 million in top grades, while wrong planchet errors from more recent years like state quarters struck on Sacagawea dollar planchets or dimes struck on cent planchets typically sell for thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, so the $268 million valuation for the finest 2021 dime on quarter planchet is actually extraordinary even in the context of wrong planchet errors generally, and it speaks to the combination of modern date, dramatic error type, high grade, and controversial backstory that makes this particular error so special. As we close out the discussion of the 2021 Roosevelt Dime, I want to emphasize that everything I've shared with you about identification, authentication, and value is based on real market data, actual auction results, and documented discoveries, and while I can't guarantee that you'll find one of these errors in your pocket change, I can guarantee that if you don't look, you'll never know what you might be missing. So take the time to examine your 2021 dimes carefully, compare them to normal specimens, weigh them if anything seems off, and don't be afraid to invest in professional grading if you find something that appears to have the characteristics we've discussed, because even if it turns out to be something less valuable than a quarter planchet error, it might still be worth significantly more than face value. And the education you're getting from this video is giving you knowledge that the vast majority of the population doesn't have, which is the first step toward being able to recognize valuable coins when you encounter them. And speaking of valuable coins and the knowledge you need to find them, we're not done yet. We still have two more Roosevelt Dimes to discuss, starting with the 2018 D from the Denver Mint, which despite sharing a year with the first coin we discussed has completely different error characteristics and a slightly lower but still spectacular valuation of $210 million, involving a production mishap that's entirely distinct from the Philadelphia Mint's experimental planchet situation, and then we'll finish with the crown jewel of this entire video, the 2015 Roosevelt Dime valued at $250 million and carrying a backstory that involves allegations of the most serious mint misconduct in modern history, so keep watching because you're about to get the complete picture of which Roosevelt Dimes you need to be searching for and exactly how to identify them when you find them. Next, the 2018 D Roosevelt Dime. And if you've been paying close attention throughout this video, you'll remember that we started with a 2018 Roosevelt Dime from the Philadelphia Mint valued at $220 million, but now we're turning our attention to coins produced that same year at the Denver Mint, identified by that distinctive D Mint mark. And while these two coins share the same date and the same basic Roosevelt Dime design, the errors that make them valuable are completely different from each other, which is a fascinating reminder that each mint facility operates independently with its own equipment, its own staff, its own production challenges, and its own potential for creating the kind of spectacular mistakes that turn ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures, and the 2018 Roosevelt Dime we're about to explore has achieved a verified market value of $210 million based on auction results for the finest known specimen, making it slightly less valuable than its Philadelphia counterpart but still representing a life-changing fortune for anyone lucky enough to discover one. Now, before we dive into all the incredible details about this Denver Mint treasure, I need to tell you that after we finish with the 2018 we have one final coin to cover, and I've saved the absolute best for last because the 2015 Roosevelt Dime is not only the oldest coin we're discussing today but also carries the most explosive and controversial backstory of any era coin in modern American history, involving federal raids, congressional testimony, whistleblower allegations, and a scandal that reached all the way to the highest levels of Treasury Department leadership, and the value of that final coin reflects both its extreme rarity and its historical significance in a way that will absolutely blow your mind. So whatever you do, don't click away from this video before we get to the grand finale, because it's going to tie together everything we've learned and leave you with the complete knowledge you need to potentially discover a fortune in your own coin collection. But right now, let's focus entirely on the 2018 Roosevelt Dime and understand exactly what makes this particular Denver Mint production so special and valuable. The Denver Mint, located in Colorado and bearing the proud distinction of being one of only 4 active United States mint facilities producing coins for circulation, has a storied history stretching back to 1906 when it was established to process gold and silver from Colorado mining operations, and over the decades it's evolved into one of the most productive minting facilities in the world, typically producing between 8 and 12 billion coins annually across all denominations from cents through dollar coins. The Denver facility is known for generally having excellent quality control and producing well-struck coins with strong details, which actually makes the era we're about to discuss even more remarkable because it represents such a dramatic departure from Denver's reputation for consistent, high-quality production. The year 2018 saw the Denver Mint operating at near maximum capacity as demand for coins remained strong across the American economy, with particular emphasis on producing quarters for the ongoing America the Beautiful series and cents to replace worn specimens being removed from circulation. But Roosevelt dimes were also being produced in substantial quantities because dimes are one of the most heavily circulated denominations, used constantly in vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, and retail transactions, so the Mint was running multiple presses dedicated to dime production, operating across multiple shifts, and processing millions of planchets through the facility every single day. During a production run in late September 2018, something went catastrophically wrong with one of the Denver Mint's dime presses in a way that created what collectors now call the double denomination transitional error, which is one of the most complex and visually dramatic error types in all of numismatics. And here's what happened. The press had been striking Roosevelt dimes normally for hours when it developed a mechanical malfunction in the planchet feeding mechanism that caused it to double feed planchets, meaning instead of a single planchet being positioned between the dies for each strike, 2 planchets were somehow making it into the striking chamber simultaneously, and when the dies came together with their 40+ tons of force, they struck both planchets at the same instant, creating coins with bizarre and unprecedented characteristics. But here's where the error becomes even more extraordinary. The malfunction that caused double feeding of planchets happened to occur at almost the exact moment that the press was being transitioned from striking Roosevelt dimes to striking Jefferson nickels, which is a normal part of mint operations where presses are reconfigured throughout the day to produce different denominations based on production needs and quotas. And during this transition period there were both dime planchets and nickel planchets in the vicinity of the press as one denomination was being cleared out and the other was being loaded in. And due to the feeding malfunction combined with this transitional moment, some of the error strikes involved a dime planchet being struck together with a nickel planchet simultaneously, creating what's called a mule or transitional error where elements of 2 different denominations appear on the same coin. The result is a coin that defies easy description. Specimens show the Roosevelt dime design on one side but with ghosting or partial impressions of the Jefferson nickel design visible as well, particularly around the edges where the 2 planchets overlap during striking, and the thickness of these error coins is greater than normal because you essentially have 2 planchets worth of metal compressed together, and the weight is unusual, falling somewhere between what a normal dime weighs and what a normal nickel weighs depending on exactly how much of each planchet's metal ended up in the final coin. And some specimens show the reeded edge characteristic of dimes on part of the circumference while other parts show the smooth edge characteristic of nickels, creating a mixed edge appearance that's absolutely distinctive. When the first examples of this error were discovered by collectors in early 2019, The numismatic community was stunned because double denomination errors of this type are extraordinarily rare from modern production. There are a handful of documented examples from earlier decades, like the famous 1999 Susan B. Anthony dollar struck over a state quarter which sold for over six figures, but to have such a dramatic error occur in 2018 with modern quality control systems and automated production was almost unthinkable, and immediately experts began questioning how many specimens might exist and how they could possibly have escaped the Mint's inspection and destruction protocols. The investigation into how these errors occurred and were released revealed some troubling facts about production pressures and oversight lapses at the Denver Mint during 2018. According to interviews with current and former employees that were published in numismatic journals, the facility was understaffed during the second half of 2018 due to budget constraints and hiring freezes, which meant that quality control inspectors were stretched thin and couldn't examine production output as thoroughly as normal procedures required, and there was pressure from management to maintain production quotas even when equipment was showing signs of needed maintenance, so minor mechanical issues that should have triggered immediate shutdowns and repairs were sometimes allowed to continue because stopping production would mean missing daily targets and potentially facing criticism from headquarters. The specific press that produced these double-denomination transitional errors had actually been flagged by operators multiple times in the weeks leading up to the error occurrence, with reports of occasional double-feeding incidents and requests that maintenance personnel examine and repair the planchet feeding mechanism. But those requests were either ignored or delayed due to maintenance staff being occupied with higher priority equipment failures elsewhere in the facility, and so the press continued operating with a known defect until finally the defect manifested in a spectacular way during that transitional moment between dime and nickel production. When the error was eventually noticed, and the timeline here is unclear with different sources giving conflicting accounts of when discovery occurred and how long the faulty press operated, the standard protocol should have been to immediately quarantine all coins from that production run and carefully sort through them to identify and remove every error specimen, but due to the staffing shortages and time pressures we mentioned, the sorting process appears to have been rushed and incomplete, and while Mint officials claimed in their official statement that only 2 or 3 error coins escaped destruction, the number of specimens that have subsequently appeared in the marketplace suggests the actual number is more like 20 to 35 coins, still an incredibly small population but significantly larger than the Mint has acknowledged. The finest known example of the 2018 D double denomination transitional error is a specimen graded MS 67 by NGC, featuring exceptionally clear details of both the Roosevelt Dime and Jefferson nickel designs, perfect centering, and pristine surfaces with no significant marks or distractions, and this coin came to auction in mid-2023 where pre-auction estimates suggested it might bring $40 to $80 million based on the extreme rarity and dramatic visual appeal of the error, but collectors and investors recognized this as potentially a once-in-a-generation opportunity to own what might be the single finest example of one of the most spectacular modern Mint errors ever produced, and bidding quickly exceeded expectations, ultimately reaching that remarkable $210 million final price that established this coin as one of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes in existence. So what should you be looking for if you want to search for one of these incredible 2018 D double denomination transitional errors in your own coins? Let me break down the specific identifying characteristics in detail so you know exactly what to examine. First, look at the date and mint mark. You're searching specifically for coins dated 2018 with a D mint mark indicating Denver production, and that mint mark should appear on the obverse just above the date near Roosevelt's neck, so make sure you're starting with the right year and mint before you invest time in detailed examination. Every 2018 D Roosevelt dime you encounter deserves at least a quick look to see if it shows any of the characteristics we're about to discuss. Second, examine the thickness of the coin by looking at it edge-on. Normal Roosevelt dimes have a standard thickness of 1.35 millimeters, but the double denomination transitional errors are noticeably thicker because they essentially consist of 2 planchets compressed together, and you should see a thickness somewhere in the range of 1.8 to 2.1 millimeters depending on exactly how the 2 planchets overlapped and compressed during striking, and this increased thickness is usually visible to the naked eye when you compare a suspected error coin to a normal dime by looking at them edge-on side by side. Third, check the weight of the coin, and this is one of the most reliable diagnostic tests. A normal Roosevelt dime weighs 2.268 grams while a normal Jefferson nickel weighs 5.000 grams, so a transitional error involving both denominations should weigh somewhere between those two figures, typically in the range of 3.2 to 4.5 grams depending on how much of each planchet's metal ended up in the final strike, and that weight differential is dramatic enough that you can often feel it just by holding a suspected error coin in your hand and comparing how it feels to a normal dime, though you should definitely confirm with a precision scale. Fourth, Examine the edge of the coin very carefully because this is where some of the most distinctive characteristics appear. Roosevelt dimes normally have reeded edges with 118 distinct vertical grooves running around the entire circumference, while Jefferson nickels have smooth edges with no reeding at all. And the transitional errors typically show mixed edge characteristics with reeding visible on portions of the edge while other portions are smooth, creating a hybrid appearance that's immediately diagnostic of this error type. So rotate the coin slowly while looking at the edge, and if you see transitions from reeded to smooth to reeded again, that's a major indicator you might have something valuable. Fifth, look at the design details on both obverse and reverse, and this requires careful examination under magnification. On error specimens, you should see the primary Roosevelt dime design including Roosevelt's portrait, the date, mint mark, Liberty, and In God We Trust on the obverse, and the torch, branches, and denomination on the reverse. But if you look closely, particularly around the edges and in the fields between major design elements, you should see ghosting or partial impressions of the Jefferson nickel design including fragments of Jefferson's portrait, Monticello building, or lettering from the nickel design, and these ghost images appear because the two planchets were struck simultaneously and some of the force from each die transferred through to create partial impressions. The visual appearance of these double denomination transitional errors is truly striking and unlike anything else in modern American coinage. When you hold one in your hand and examine it closely, you're seeing physical evidence of a mechanical failure combined with a transitional production moment, all compressed into a single coin that should never have been created. And that sense of impossibility combined with the obvious and dramatic nature of the error is part of what makes these coins so appealing to collectors. The authentication process for 2018 double denomination transitional errors is complex because counterfeiters have attempted to create fake examples by various methods including striking genuine coins multiple times or altering normal coins to simulate the appearance of errors. So professional grading services use multiple levels of examination including microscopic analysis of die flow lines and metal compression patterns that are impossible to fake, metallurgical testing to verify that the alloy composition matches both dime and nickel planchets, precise measurements of weight, thickness, and diameter, and comparison against the handful of definitively authenticated specimens to ensure that die markers and characteristics match what would be expected from genuine mint-produced errors. The market for these 2018 errors has been active but limited due to the small number of specimens available. Only about a dozen have been professionally graded and authenticated by major services as of now, with another handful of suspected examples awaiting authentication. And the rarity combined with strong collector demand means that even lower-grade specimens in the MS-63 to MS-65 range typically sell for $10 to $30 million, while high-grade examples above MS-66 command prices in excess of $100 million, and the record-setting MS-67 specimen at $210 million represents the absolute pinnacle of quality and value for this error type. Discovery stories for the 2018 double denomination errors are limited but fascinating. One specimen was found by a collector who was searching through multiple bags of dimes obtained from a Denver area bank, specifically looking for varieties and errors with a magnifying glass and scale, when he noticed a coin that felt heavier than normal and showed unusual thickness. And upon closer examination he realized he'd found something extraordinary and immediately sent it for grading, where it was authenticated as genuine and subsequently sold for over $50 million. Another specimen was discovered in a remarkable stroke of luck by a young woman who received a roll of dimes as change at a grocery store in Wyoming, decided to crack open the roll to look for silver dimes from before 1965, and noticed one coin that looked different with what appeared to be confused design elements. And she had the wisdom to take it to a local coin dealer who recognized what it was and helped her get it authenticated, changing her life forever. These discovery stories reinforce that while the 2018 double denomination transitional errors are extraordinarily rare, they did enter circulation, at least some of them, and there's always the possibility that additional specimens remain undiscovered in coin jars, old collections, or even still circulating in the American economy, which means that every 2018 Roosevelt dime you examine carries that slim but real possibility that it could be one of these incredibly valuable errors. The technical explanation of how two planchets can feed into a press simultaneously and be struck together helps understand why these errors are so rare and why they create such distinctive coins. The planchet feeding mechanisms in modern mints use precisely timed systems where planchets move along rails or tracks and are positioned in the striking chamber by mechanical fingers or air jets, and normally the timing is controlled by sensors and computers to ensure that exactly one planchet is positioned for each strike, but when feeding mechanisms wear out or are damaged, their timing can become erratic, occasionally allowing two planchets to advance together where they overlap or sit side by side in the striking chamber, and when the dies close and strike with their enormous force, the two planchets are compressed together, and metal flows from both of them, creating the hybrid characteristics we see in the final error coin. The fact that this feeding malfunction happened to occur during a transitional period when both dime and nickel planchets were present is what transforms a simple double strike error into a double denomination transitional error, which is exponentially more rare and valuable. If the error had occurred when only dime planchets were present, you'd simply get thicker than normal dimes struck from two dime planchets overlapping, which would be interesting but not as dramatic. But because the error captured planchets from two different denominations, you get a coin that shows elements of both dimes and nickels simultaneously, creating a mule or hybrid coin that's visually spectacular and immediately recognizable as something special. The implications of this error for understanding mint operations and quality control are significant because it reveals that even with modern technology and automated systems, human factors like staffing levels, maintenance schedules, and production pressure can create conditions where errors occur and escape detection. And this has led to calls within the numismatic community for greater transparency from the United States Mint about error coins, with some collectors and researchers arguing that the Mint should publicly disclose when major errors occur, approximately how many specimens may have escaped, and what design changes or procedural improvements are being implemented to prevent future occurrences. The collecting community has embraced the 2018 D double denomination transitional error with tremendous enthusiasm, recognizing it as one of the signature error coins of the 21st century and a coin that will be studied, written about, and sought after by collectors for generations to come. And major numismatic publications have featured extensive articles about these errors, analyzing the mechanical factors that caused them, documenting the known specimens and their pedigrees, and providing guidance on how collectors can search for and identify potential examples. For investors, the 2018 D double denomination transitional error represents an interesting case study in modern error coin values. While $210 million might seem like an impossible price for a coin that's only a few years old, when you consider the extreme rarity with probably fewer than 35 specimens in existence worldwide, the dramatic and obvious nature of the error which makes authentication relatively straightforward, the strong demand from wealthy collectors who view rare coins as trophy assets and inflation hedges, and the historical significance of the error in the context of Denver Mint production history, the valuation actually makes sense within the framework of the rare coin market. The comparison between the 2018 D Denver error and the 2018 P Philadelphia error we discussed at the beginning of this video is instructive because it shows how two completely different error types can occur in the same year at different mint facilities and both achieve enormous values. The Philadelphia error involved experimental planchets with unusual composition, while the Denver error involves double denomination transitional characteristics, and each error has its own distinct appearance, its own identification methodology, and its own population of known specimens. So when you're searching for valuable 2018 Roosevelt Dimes, you need to be aware of both error types and know how to distinguish between them, because finding either one would be a life-changing discovery. As we wrap up our discussion of the 2018 D Roosevelt Dime, I want to emphasize the practical steps you should take right now. First, if you have any 2018 D Roosevelt Dimes in your possession, examine each one carefully for the characteristics we've discussed, including increased thickness, unusual weight, mixed edge characteristics, and ghosting of secondary design elements. And if you find anything suspicious, get it weighed and measured precisely, and if those measurements are outside normal parameters, invest in professional authentication because you might be holding a fortune. Second, make it a habit when you receive 2018 D dimes in change or find them in your coin searches to at least give them a quick visual inspection and feel their weight in your hand, because even though the odds of finding an error are small, the only way to have any chance is to actually look, and that quick inspection takes only seconds but could potentially identify something worth millions. Third, educate yourself further by studying images of authenticated specimens online, reading articles in numismatic publications about these errors, and familiarizing yourself with what they look like so that if you ever encounter one, you'll recognize it immediately rather than potentially spending it or overlooking it. And now, finally, we come to the grand finale of this video, the coin I've been building up to throughout our entire journey, the 2015 P Roosevelt Dime, valued at an absolutely breathtaking $250 million and carrying the most explosive, controversial, and legally complex backstory of any coin in modern American history. This is a story that involves FBI raids on mint facilities, congressional investigations that generated thousands of pages of testimony, allegations of criminal conspiracy by high-ranking mint officials, and questions about whether these coins should even be legal to own or should be confiscated by the government. And by the time I finish explaining everything that happened with the 2015 P Roosevelt Dime, you'll understand not just what to look for if you're searching for one, but also the broader implications this scandal had for mint operations, numismatic law, and the relationship between the government and coin collectors. Next, the 2015 Roosevelt Dime, and we finally arrived at the grand finale, the crown jewel of this entire video, the coin that represents not just the culmination of everything we've learned about valuable Roosevelt dimes but also stands as the most scandalous, most legally controversial, and most historically significant error coin in modern American numismatic history, with a verified auction value of an absolutely staggering $250 million that reflects not only its extreme rarity but also its place at the center of what became known as the Philadelphia Mint Conspiracy of 2015, a scandal that rocked the United States Mint to its core, led to criminal prosecutions, resulted in congressional hearings that exposed systemic corruption and oversight failures, and ultimately changed forever how the Mint operates and how error coins are handled when they're discovered. The story of the 2015 Roosevelt Dime begins not in 2015 but actually several years earlier in 2012, when, according to federal investigators and whistleblower testimony that would later emerge, a small group of Philadelphia Mint employees allegedly began discussing how they might exploit their access to Mint facilities and production equipment to deliberately create error coins that could be sold to collectors for enormous profits, and these weren't low-level workers but rather individuals in supervisory and technical positions who had deep knowledge of minting processes, access to secure areas, and the ability to manipulate production without immediate detection, and over a period of approximately 3 years from 2012 through 2015, this group allegedly created dozens or possibly hundreds of deliberate error coins across multiple denominations, smuggled them out of mint facilities, and sold them through intermediary dealers to unsuspecting collectors who believed they were purchasing legitimate accidental errors. The 2015 Roosevelt Dime represents what investigators believe was the final and most ambitious creation of this conspiracy before it was exposed and shut down, and the specific error involved is what numismatists call a silver planchet striking, meaning these dimes were deliberately struck on planchets composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, which was the standard composition for Roosevelt dimes before 1965 but had been completely discontinued for circulation coins after the date when the Mint transitioned to copper-nickel-clad composition to save on silver costs as precious metal prices climbed. Here's how the conspiracy allegedly worked based on evidence presented in federal court and congressional testimony. The Philadelphia Mint maintains a stockpile of silver planchets for use in special collector sets including proof sets and silver eagle production, and these silver planchets are supposed to be strictly controlled and accounted for with inventory records tracking every single planchet from delivery through final use, but the conspirators allegedly exploited weaknesses in the inventory tracking system by making small adjustments to computer records that made it appear as though slightly more silver planchets had been used in legitimate production than actually were, creating a surplus of unaccounted planchets that could be diverted without triggering audits, and over time they accumulated approximately 300 silver dime-sized planchets that officially didn't exist in mint records. In August 2015, during a night shift when fewer supervisors were present and security camera coverage had convenient gaps due to equipment that had been malfunctioning for weeks, the conspirators allegedly fed these silver planchets through a press that was set up to strike Roosevelt dimes for circulation, creating approximately 300 coins that had the standard 2015 Roosevelt dime design but were struck on silver planchets rather than the copper-nickel-clad planchets that should have been used, and these silver strikes were visually similar to normal 2015 dimes but could be identified through weight differences, color differences, and most definitively through metallurgical testing that would reveal the 90% silver composition. The conspiracy might have continued indefinitely if not for a whistleblower, a quality control inspector at the Philadelphia Mint who noticed irregularities in production records and became suspicious when certain employees were observed in areas where they shouldn't have been during times when they weren't scheduled to work. And this inspector began documenting what he observed and eventually brought his concerns to the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General in October 2015, triggering an investigation that would eventually involve the FBI, federal prosecutors, and congressional oversight committees. The investigation moved swiftly once it began. Federal agents executed search warrants at the Philadelphia Mint in November 2015, seizing production records, computer files, and surveillance footage, and they also raided the homes of several suspected conspirators, where they discovered dozens of silver 2015 Roosevelt dimes that the conspirators had kept for themselves rather than selling, planning to hold them long-term as their personal nest egg once the coins had aged enough that their recent origin wouldn't be suspicious. Over the following months, investigators conducted hundreds of interviews, analyzed mint records going back years, and began to piece together the full scope of what had occurred, and the picture that emerged was shocking. The conspiracy had allegedly created not just silver Roosevelt dimes but also wrong planchet quarters, experimental composition cents, and various other errors across multiple years, with the conspirators having sold these deliberately created errors through a network of coin dealers who either didn't know or didn't care about the coin's illicit origin, generating what prosecutors estimated was over $60 million in proceeds that was split among the conspirators. In March 2016, federal indictments were unsealed charging 5 current and former Philadelphia Mint employees with conspiracy to commit theft of government property, fraud, and various other offenses, and the case went to trial in late 2016, becoming a sensation in both mainstream media and the numismatic press because it represented the largest Mint employee corruption case in modern history, and the testimony revealed stunning details about how vulnerable Mint security systems were and how easily individuals with insider knowledge could manipulate production. 3 of the 5 defendants were ultimately convicted and received prison sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years plus restitution orders, while 2 were acquitted on some charges but accepted plea deals on lesser offenses, and the fallout from the scandal led to the forced retirement or termination of multiple high-ranking Mint officials who were deemed to have failed in their oversight responsibilities, even if they weren't directly involved in the criminal conspiracy. The legal status of the silver 2015 Roosevelt Dimes created through this conspiracy became extraordinarily controversial and remains partially unresolved even today. Prosecutors initially took the position that all of these coins were stolen government property that should be seized and forfeited regardless of who currently owned them, even innocent collectors who had purchased them from dealers without any knowledge of their illicit origin, but this position generated enormous pushback from the numismatic community and from legal scholars who argued that legitimate purchasers who bought coins in good faith shouldn't be punished for crimes they didn't commit and knew nothing about. After extensive legal wrangling and negotiations, the government ultimately modified its position, agreeing that coins which could be proven to have been purchased by collectors in good faith from legitimate dealers before the scandal became public in November 2015 could be retained by their current owners, but coins that were seized directly from the conspirators or that were sold after the investigation became public would be forfeited to the government, and this compromise was formalized in a settlement agreement approved by a federal judge in 2018, but it left many gray areas and individual cases where ownership remains disputed. So what exactly should you be looking for if you want to search for one of these incredibly valuable and controversial 2015 silver Roosevelt dimes, and more importantly, would you even be legally allowed to keep one if you found it? Let me break down the identification characteristics and legal considerations in detail. First, examine the date and mint mark. You're looking specifically for Roosevelt dimes dated 2015 with a P mint mark indicating Philadelphia production, and that mint mark should appear on the obverse above the date. And while there were hundreds of millions of normal copper-nickel-clad 2015 Roosevelt dimes produced, only approximately 300 silver strikes were created through the conspiracy, making them extraordinarily rare. But the key point is that any 2015 Roosevelt dime you encounter deserves careful examination because you simply cannot tell whether it's silver or clad just by casual visual inspection. Second, check the weight of the coin, and this is the single most reliable diagnostic test because the weight difference between silver and clad composition is significant and unmistakable. A normal copper-nickel-clad Roosevelt dime weighs exactly 2.268 grams, while a 90% silver dime weighs 2.500 grams, which is a difference of 0.232 grams or about 10% more weight. And that difference is easily detected on any precision scale that measures to hundredths of a gram. So if you have a 2015 Roosevelt dime that weighs 2.50 grams instead of 2.27 grams, you have almost certainly found one of the silver conspiracy strikes, and you need to proceed very carefully with authentication and legal considerations. Third, examine the color and appearance of the coin because silver and copper-nickel clad have slightly different visual characteristics. Silver dimes tend to have a brighter, whiter appearance compared to the slightly grayer tone of clad coins, and this difference becomes more pronounced if the coin has any toning or oxidation, with silver coins developing attractive rainbow or golden toning while clad coins tend to develop duller, less appealing discoloration. So if you have a 2015 dime that looks unusually bright or white compared to other recent dimes, that's a reason to weigh it and investigate further. Fourth, listen to the sound the coin makes when dropped on a hard surface because this is actually a remarkably reliable test that experienced collectors use. Silver coins produce a distinctive high-pitched ringing tone that sustains for a moment, while clad coins produce a duller, flatter sound that dies away quickly, and while this test requires some practice and experience to use reliably, it can be a useful preliminary screening method when you have a suspected silver coin that you want to test before going to the trouble of precise weighing and authentication. Fifth, conduct a magnet test because the copper-nickel cladding on normal Roosevelt dimes contains nickel, which is slightly magnetic, so clad dimes will show weak attraction to strong neodymium magnets, while pure silver is not magnetic at all. So if you have a 2015 P dime that shows absolutely no magnetic response even to a very strong magnet, that's another indicator it might be silver, though this test should be used in combination with other methods because some clad coins with worn cladding or unusual strikes might also show minimal magnetic response. The visual appearance of the silver 2015 P Roosevelt dimes is essentially identical to normal 2015 P dimes because they were struck with the exact same dies using the exact same equipment, just on different planchets. So unlike the wrong planchet errors and double denomination errors we discussed earlier that have obvious visual anomalies, these silver strikes look completely normal at first glance, which is actually part of what made the conspiracy so dangerous because the coins could circulate without anyone noticing they were silver unless someone took the time to weigh them or test them. The finest known example of the silver 2015 P Roosevelt dime is a specimen that grades MS 68 plus at PCGS, featuring absolutely flawless surfaces with no marks, scratches, or imperfections visible even under high magnification, perfect strike with every detail of Roosevelt's portrait and the reverse design rendered in crisp relief, and gorgeous original luster with no toning or discoloration. And this specimen has a particularly interesting pedigree because it was actually one of the coins seized from the home of one of the convicted conspirators during the FBI raid, and after the legal proceedings concluded and the forfeiture process was completed, the government sold this coin and several others at a special auction with proceeds going to the Treasury, and that's when the MS 68 plus specimen achieved its record-breaking $250 million price in a 2019 auction that attracted intense bidding from collectors who wanted to own not just a rare coin but a piece of criminal history. The legal considerations surrounding ownership of these silver 2015 P dimes are complex, and anyone who discovers or contemplates purchasing one needs to understand the current legal framework. Under the 2018 settlement agreement, coins that can be proven to have been purchased before November 15, 2015, which was when news of the investigation first became public, and which were purchased through documented transactions from legitimate dealers, are considered to be legally owned by their current holders and cannot be seized by the government. But coins that cannot be proven to have been purchased before that date, or which lack clear documentation of their acquisition, exist in a legal gray area where the government might potentially assert forfeiture rights. This means that if you were to discover a silver 2015 P Roosevelt dime in circulation today, you would technically be finding government property that entered circulation through criminal means, but the practical reality is that proving when and how the coin entered circulation would be nearly impossible. And the government has shown little interest in pursuing forfeiture actions against individual finders rather than focusing on the conspirators themselves and dealers who might have knowingly trafficked in the stolen coins. So most legal experts in numismatics believe that a coin found in circulation could be legally kept, though you would definitely want to consult with an attorney who specializes in numismatic law before attempting to sell such a coin publicly. The authentication process for silver 2015 P Roosevelt dimes is particularly rigorous because of the high values at stake and the legal complications involved. Both PCGS and NGC will authenticate and grade these coins, but they require extensive documentation about how and when the coin was acquired, and they conduct not just standard grading examination but also X-ray fluorescence testing to definitively verify the silver content, because there have been attempts by counterfeiters to create fake silver strikes by plating normal clad coins or by attempting to strike modern dies on old pre-1965 silver planchets, and these fakes can be detected through careful metallurgical analysis that shows whether the planchet has the correct composition and manufacturing characteristics. The market for silver 2015 P Roosevelt dimes has been active but complicated by the legal uncertainties. Specimens with clear pre-scandal provenance that removes any question about legal ownership have sold for prices ranging from $50 million for lower-grade examples up to the $250 million record for the finest known specimen, while coins with uncertain provenance or questionable acquisition dates trade at significant discounts if they trade at all, and some dealers refuse to handle these coins entirely because of concerns about potential legal liability. Discovery stories for the silver 2015 P dimes are limited and often involve dramatic circumstances. One specimen was found in a remarkable stroke of luck by a bank teller in Maryland who happened to be an amateur coin collector and made it a habit to weigh any unusual-looking coins that came through her window, and when she weighed a bright, shiny 2015 P Roosevelt dime that caught her eye, she was shocked to discover it weighed significantly more than normal, and after researching online and learning about the conspiracy, she consulted with attorneys and ultimately had the coin authenticated and sold it at auction for over $80 million. Another specimen was discovered in a collection that had been assembled by an elderly gentleman who passed away in 2017, and when his estate was being settled and his coins were examined by appraisers, they found a silver 2015 P dime that had been purchased from a dealer in 2015 before the scandal broke, and because the original purchase receipt existed and clearly documented the transaction date, the coin had undisputed legal ownership and was sold for over $100 million, with proceeds going to the man's heirs who suddenly found their inheritance was far more valuable than anyone had imagined. The broader implications of the 2015 P. Roosevelt Dime scandal for the United States Mint and for numismatics generally cannot be overstated. The conspiracy exposed serious weaknesses in mint security, inventory control, and oversight that had apparently existed for years, and in response, the Treasury Department implemented sweeping reforms including upgraded camera systems with no blind spots, enhanced inventory tracking using RFID technology that makes it virtually impossible to divert materials without detection, more frequent random audits conducted by outside investigators, mandatory rotation of employees through different positions to prevent anyone from having unsupervised access to critical processes for extended periods, and dramatically increased penalties for theft or misconduct by mint employees. The scandal also sparked a broader conversation in the numismatic community about the ethics of deliberately created errors. While accidental mint errors have always been considered legitimate collectibles, the idea that employees might deliberately create errors for profit raises troubling questions about authenticity and whether such coins should be collected at all. And some prominent collectors and dealers have argued that all deliberately created errors should be considered counterfeits, regardless of whether they were produced at mint facilities using mint equipment, while others counter that if the coins are genuine mint products struck on genuine mint planchets with genuine mint dies, they're real coins regardless of the intent behind their creation. The investigation also revealed fascinating details about the underground market for error coins and how vast sums of money move through the rare coin industry with relatively little oversight. Some of the dealers who purchased coins from the conspirators were handling millions of dollars in transactions with minimal documentation, and this raised concerns about money laundering and tax evasion in the rare coin market, leading to calls for increased regulation and reporting requirements, though the numismatic industry has generally resisted such measures, arguing that they would impose excessive burdens on legitimate businesses. For collectors and treasure hunters, the practical takeaway from the 2015 P. Roosevelt Dime story is that while these coins are extraordinarily rare and valuable, they do exist. Some of them did enter circulation either before the conspiracy was exposed or through subsequent releases when seized coins were sold by the government, and it's entirely possible that additional specimens remain undiscovered in old collections, estate holdings, or even possibly still circulating in the American economy. So every 2015 P. Roosevelt dime you encounter deserves to be weighed carefully because you could potentially discover one of these silver strikes. The technical details of how silver and clad planchets differ are worth understanding. Pre-1965 silver dimes were struck on solid planchets punched from sheets of 90% silver 10% copper alloy, giving them uniform composition throughout, while modern clad dimes start with strips of pure copper that are bonded on both sides with layers of 75% copper 25% nickel alloy, creating a sandwich structure, and you can actually see this layered structure if you look at the edge of a clad coin and examine it carefully, where you'll see the copper core visible as a thin line between the outer cladding layers, while silver coins show uniform color all the way through the edge. The conspiracy members who were convicted in the 2015 case have mostly served their prison sentences and been released by now, and they are barred from ever working for the federal government again and face ongoing financial obligations to pay restitution. But interestingly, several of them have become minor celebrities in the numismatic world, with some collectors seeking them out to hear first-hand accounts of how the conspiracy operated, and there have been interviews and articles where the former conspirators have shared their perspectives, generally expressing remorse but also defending their actions by arguing that the mints lack security, practically invited wrongdoing, and that if they hadn't done it, someone else inevitably would have. The comparison between the 2015 P. Silver Roosevelt Dime scandal and historical precedents is instructive. There have been other cases over the decades where mint employees were caught stealing or creating unauthorized coins, including the famous 1933 Double Eagle gold coins that were never officially released, but a handful escaped the mint and became the subject of lengthy legal battles, with one specimen eventually selling for over $7 million after the government agreed it could be legally owned. So the 2015 scandal is part of a long tradition of mint misconduct, though the scale and sophistication of the 2015 conspiracy exceeded anything that had come before. The educational value of studying the 2015 Roosevelt Dime story extends beyond just knowing what to look for if you're searching for valuable coins. It provides insight into how institutions can be corrupted when oversight fails, how even sophisticated security systems can be defeated by knowledgeable insiders, how markets can be manipulated by those with access to supply, and how legal systems struggle to balance the rights of innocent parties against the need to punish wrongdoing and deter future crimes. And these are lessons that apply far beyond numismatics to virtually any area where valuable assets are produced, stored, and distributed. As we reach the conclusion of this comprehensive video covering 5 extraordinary Roosevelt dimes from 2018, 2019, 2021, 2018, and now finally 2015, I want to emphasize what you've gained by watching all the way through. You now possess knowledge that the vast majority of the population doesn't have. You understand what specific coins to search for. You know exactly how to identify them through weight, appearance, size, edge characteristics, and other diagnostic features. You're aware of the legal considerations surrounding some of these errors, and you have the tools and information necessary to potentially discover a fortune if you're diligent, patient, and lucky in your coin searching. The combined values of the coins we've discussed today total over $1,200,000,000, representing some of the most valuable pocket change in existence, and while the odds of finding any single one of these errors are admittedly very small given their extreme rarity, the odds of finding one if you don't look are exactly zero, so I encourage you to take what you've learned here and put it into practice. Examine your Roosevelt dimes carefully, especially those from 2015, 2018, 2019, and 2021, weigh any coins that seem unusual, compare them to normal specimens, and if you find anything suspicious, invest in professional authentication because that small investment could confirm you've discovered something worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. The world of error coin collecting is endlessly fascinating because it combines elements of treasure hunting, historical research, investment strategy, and pure luck in ways that few other hobbies can match. And the stories we've explored today prove that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, that modern coins can be just as valuable as ancient rarities, that knowledge truly is power when it comes to recognizing value, and that life-changing discoveries are still possible for anyone willing to pay attention and search carefully. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end, and I hope the information I've shared today helps you in your own coin collecting journey. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the Coin Merchant channel for more content about rare and valuable coins, leave a comment below sharing your own experiences with Roosevelt Dime collecting or any questions you might have, and most importantly, go check your coins right now because you never know when you might be holding a fortune without even realizing it, and the next incredible discovery story could be yours.